All right, so welcome to the deep dive, everybody. Today, we're going to a place that's, well, technically right here in New York City, but it feels like it's a million miles away. Heart Island.
Oh, absolutely.
This island that's, well, it's been used as a burial ground for unclaimed bodies for, gosh, over a century.
A potter's field.
Yeah, Potter's Field. So, we've got this YouTube video transcript today
Yes.
of a thriller movie set on, you guessed it, Heart Island. And even though it's fiction, I think, looking at this movie, it can really help us understand these anxieties that people have about death, and how society tends to forget certain people.
Exactly. It's like looking through this fictional lens to see these very real, very serious issues.
Right, exactly. So let me set this up for you. The movie is about this cynical cop, Sergeant O'Keefe.
Okay.
And she's sent to Heart Island to identify the remains of, well, a young girl.
Oh, wow.
But things get a lot more complicated than that,
I bet.
as you can imagine.
Yeah.
So then there's this guy, Rupert King. He's this super wealthy developer,
Oh, boy.
and he wants to turn Heart Island into, get this, Hope City. It's supposed to be this utopia for the city's homeless population.
Hope City.
Yeah, but it sounds more like a recipe for a disaster.
I was about to say, it doesn't sound very hopeful.
Yeah. And the transcript paints a pretty grim picture of his intentions. And then on top of all this, there's this group of convicts.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And they're forced to work on the island, like digging graves and stuff.
Oh, geez.
And they end up uncovering some really unsettling secrets. Like, it kind of makes you think, if these convicts weren't there, would these secrets have ever come to light?
That's such a good point. It's like those on the fringes of society are often the ones who are forced to expose these things.
Right, exactly. And then the story gets even darker because this mysterious illness breaks out.
Oh, no.
Yeah, on the island. And it spreads so fast. And it's deadly.
So, like, what is it? Is it some supernatural plague? Or is it, like, a metaphor for society falling apart?
Yeah, or the way we treat the most vulnerable people. I mean, it really keeps you guessing.
I think that ambiguity is part of what makes this movie so unsettling. It's like it just taps into our fear of the unknown, especially in a place like Heart Island.
Right, exactly. Which is already a pretty mysterious place. And speaking of unsettling, this creepy children's rhyme keeps coming up over and over in the movie.
Like what?
Don't you laugh when the hearse goes by, or you will be the next to die.
Oh, wow. That's creepy.
Yeah, it is. It's like a constant reminder about death,
Absolutely. It's like one of those, what are they called? Those memento mori.
Mm-hmm.
And on Heart Island, it takes on this whole new meaning,
Yeah.
with all the bodies buried there, it's like the island itself is whispering about death.
Right, about that thin line between being alive and being dead. One thing that really stood out to me was Sergeant O'Keefe's, obsession with names.
Within names.
Yeah. Like, she's really focused on giving names to the unnamed dead. She thinks it's super important to, like, acknowledge their humanity, even though they're, dead.
Well, it makes sense when you think about it. Heart Island has always been a place where people's identities are kind of erased. Prisoners, the poor, the sick, they were all buried in these mass graves, no individuality.
Right. So O'Keefe is almost trying to push against that.
Like she's trying to restore their dignity, the people who've been forgotten.
And then you've got Rupert King, who's basically the exact opposite. He wants to, like, stamp his name on everything. Like, he wants to control everything, even a place like Heart Island.
It's almost like he's exploiting the dead for his own gain.
Yeah.
Which is the total opposite of what O'Keefe's trying to do.
Right. It's like whose stories matter, who gets remembered and who gets left behind.
Yeah. That's a good question.
And it's not just about names either. The convicts who are working on the island, they find something really messed up.
Oh no. What now?
They find all these bodies that were, like, recently buried, but they're decomposing super fast, like way too fast, like something sinister has happened.
Oh, wow. That's disturbing. I mean, it could be supernatural, but it also makes you think about, how society gets rid of the people it doesn't want. It's like, are these bodies a metaphor for how quickly we forget about those who are marginalized?
That's a great point.
Like we cast them aside and forget about them.
And then, of course, the movie, like, totally explodes in this crazy climax.
What happened?
Rupert King, well, he dies. And the other characters, they're fighting for their lives against these, get this, reanimated corpses.
Oh my God. That's crazy.
It's like all our fears coming to life. Literally.
It's like, the island is rebelling against King trying to control this sacred place, this place where people are supposed to rest in peace.
Right. And the reanimated dead, I mean, that's a really powerful image, isn't it?
Yeah, like it's the return of everything that's been repressed, you know, all the consequences of taking advantage of vulnerable people.
Like the people we've marginalized, the people we've tried to bury and forget.
Exactly. They're rising up and demanding to be seen.
And that's what makes the movie so thought-provoking, even if it is a little over the top.
For sure. It makes you confront all these uncomfortable truths about death and how we deal with it, you know?
Yeah.
Who gets remembered and who gets forgotten.
Right. And Heart Island isn't just some fictional setting. I mean, it's a real place.
With a real history.
Yeah, a real history.
It's not just the big picture either. This movie, it weaves in these personal stories, you know? Like Sergeant O'Keefe, she's trying to find this missing convict, Neely.
Oh, right.
He vanished when everything went crazy at the end. So she's got these two mysteries on her hands, trying to identify that young girl's remains, A&D, find this guy Neely.
It's like those two mysteries are kind of connected, right? Like they both involve putting these little pieces of information together, you know, to uncover this hidden truth, whether it's about one person or the whole island.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's this moment where, well, O'Keefe, she stumbles upon King's like secret files.
Uh-oh.
And it turns out he was running these, well, they were unethical medical experiments on the homeless people living on the island.
No way.
Yeah, he was using them like guinea pigs.
Yeah.
It's a chilling reminder that sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones that look just like us.
Oh, for sure. It's like the movie saying, don't trust anyone, you know? Like beneath all this fake philanthropy, there's this abuse of power. It makes you wonder how many real-life Rupert Kings are out there, just hiding in plain sight.
Right. It's a scary thought. And it ties back to what we were talking about earlier, you know, whose stories get told and whose stories get silenced.
Right.
King, with all his money and influence, he controlled everything. But the people he was hurting, they had no voice,
Right.
no power.
It's messed up. But even with all the awful stuff, all the darkness, there are these little glimmers of hope. Like there's a part where O'Keefe, she risks her own life to save this convict, Tony. Yeah, it shows that even when things are scary, even when things are dangerous, people can still be good. You know, they can still be compassionate.
Oh, definitely. And don't forget, it's the convicts who survive the night. They get off the island.
Right.
And they're the only ones who know the truth about what King was doing. It's almost like because they were already marginalized, they could see what was really happening. Like they weren't fooled by King's lies.
Yeah, that's interesting. Makes you wonder what happens after the movie's over, though, right? Like, do the convicts convince anyone about what King did? Does society actually care? The movie leaves that open.
I think that's what's so unsettling about it.
Yeah.
You know, like, are we as a society ready to face these uncomfortable truths? Are we going to do anything about it? Or are we just going to ignore it?
It's a heavy question. It's not like a happy ending. You know, the convicts, they get away, but they're going to carry that experience with them. It's like a reminder that even when you face these dark things, these bad things, it changes you.
It leaves a mark. You know, it makes you think about the real people who worked on Heart Island. All those years burying the dead. That must have been hard to face death every single day.
Yeah, I bet. So we've got this fictional story. You know, it's got a haunted island, all this medical stuff, and these themes about greed. What can we really take away from this? Like, what can we apply to our own lives?
Well, I think it makes us think about how we treat people who are different, people who don't have as much as we do. Like, it forces us to see that there are places like Heart Island, not just here, but all over. Places where people who are forgotten get buried.
Places where people get erased.
Exactly.
It's like a reminder that there are real people behind all these stories. Real people who we've forgotten about. And I don't know, it makes me think, what can we do to help people who are struggling? Like, what's our responsibility?
It's a good question. And I think it's amazing how this horror movie, you know, something that's supposed to be entertainment, can make us think about these big questions.
It shows how powerful stories can be.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Like, even if a story is made up, it can still hold up a mirror to society, make us look at ourselves. And this deep dive has really opened my eyes.
Mine too. It's been, well, intense, but in a good way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been pretty wild. But you know, even though the convicts, they escape in the end, it's not really a happy ending, is it? I mean, they're obviously like really traumatized by everything they saw.
Oh, for sure. It's not a Hollywood ending, that's for sure. It reminds us that, you know, even when you face these dark things, even when justice prevails, there are still consequences. Like, these things change you.
It leaves a scar, you know? Makes you think about all the real people who worked on Heart Island all those years. just burying the dead day after day.
Yeah, that must have been, well, it must have been heavy to
Oh.
just constantly be surrounded by death.
Yeah, I can't even imagine. So, okay, we've got this fictional story, Haunted Island, crazy medical experiments, all this greed and exploitation. What can we, like, as listeners, what can we take away from all of this?
Well, I think, on a basic level, it challenges us to think about how we treat people who are different from us, people who don't have what we have. It forces us to acknowledge that these places like Hart Island, they exist.
Yeah.
Not just in New York, but everywhere. These places where people are just forgotten.
Buried and forgotten.
It's a good reminder that these aren't just statistics,
Yeah.
These are real people, real lives.
And they matter. It makes you wonder, like, what can we do to help? What's our responsibility to those who, are struggling, the ones whose stories don't get told?
It's a question worth asking,
Mhm.
And I think it's just fascinating how a horror movie, something that's supposed to be entertainment, can make us think about these things.
It really shows how powerful stories are, even if they aren't true. They can make us look at the world differently, make us think about our own lives.
Absolutely. This whole deep dive, it's really been, well, it's been eye-opening.
It has, and I think it leaves us with this one last question: like, what is it about Hart Island that's so unsettling? Is it just, because it's a place where people are buried, or is it something more than that? Is it, the way those people were treated when they were alive?
Yeah. That's something for everyone to think about, I guess.
Yeah.
What resonates with you? What will you take away from this deep dive into Hart Island?
Thanks for listening, everyone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep digging for those deeper truths, the ones that are hidden beneath the surface.